Good evening, friends. How are you? Welcome to In His Will, the life of Louisa. How much do we really know? Tonight, we're going to get into it. We're going to start talking about Louisa and understand her childhood and her growing up years and really get to know Louisa. Coming up on In His Will. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to In His Will. I'm so glad to see you. And here I am with beautiful Dawn. Hello, Dawn. How are you?
Good. Good to see you guys again.
Good to be back with you guys. And uh, uh, tonight we're going to talk about something kind of a little bit different. And I'm very excited about it because, one of the things that I've really been aware of recently is that we emphasize so much about reading the writings, which are extremely important and we must do every day. It's we hear very, very little really about the life of Louisa and what it was like. So I think we need to get to know Louisa a little bit better, love her a little more deeply. She's a servant of God. We love our saints, and Louisa is on her way to sainthood. So we're going to learn more about her so that we can love all that she did in the divine will, for the divine will, and with Jesus, and just get to know her a little bit better. But before we start, Dawn, could you lead us in one of your beautiful prayers?
Yes. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Holy Trinity, we just thank you for this time to be able to spend together as a community. And we pray that you please send the Holy Spirit to open our minds, our hearts, our eyes, our ears to hear and learn about you as we study the life of Luisa today. Thank you so much. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. So,
Amen.
Debbie, talking about birthdays, I was thinking that, we could talk about the birthday of Luisa, but we also have somebody in our audience that has birthday. So happy birthday, confidence in God. I hope that you have a very beautiful birthday and many more to come.
And thank you for sharing part of your birthday with us.
Yes.
Sharing part of your birthday with us, that's exciting because, you only get one a year. And so you got to make the most of it. Every minute of it. I always say, it's like, okay, this is your one day.
Yeah.
Get up early, go to bed late. Well, you're welcome so much, and we're glad to see everyone here because we love talking about the divine will and we love talking about our beautiful Luisa Picaretta. And so, as I said, I wanted to talk a little bit about the life of Luisa, and in fact, I'll just throw this out there. I'm actually thinking about doing a little series on Luisa and her life and what her life was like. She lived a very extraordinary life, unlike anybody I've ever even heard about. So I think it's a good idea for us to get to know her a little bit better. I love getting to know the lives of the saints, their families, how they grew up, what kind of what kind of formation did they have? Where were they? What was going on in the world when they were coming up? Because, we go through this litany of saints and we start looking at their lives. They were all so different. And yet, their lives were exclusively um, just focused on and dedicated to the love of God. And so
I
I think,
yeah, I agree. Like to be able to see the transformation of their spiritual lives is such a great it's such a great help to know that they came from a place where they didn't know very much and they just grew, and it's just kind of inspiring.
it's very inspiring, and Louisa, and let's just start talking about Louisa a little bit and where she came up.
Yeah, when was she born, Debbie? Do you remember?
Actually born in Corrado, And this is a part of uh, Italy called Puglia, and Puglia was a rather rural is a rather rural um, section of Italy. It's in the province of Bari, and she was born on April 23rd, 1865. Now, think about what was going on in our country. If you're from the United States, I know some of you aren't, but in our country in 1865, what was going on? We had just we were experiencing a civil war, and so that kind of puts it in perspective for you about when she was born. Um, it was April 23rd, and she died on March the 4th of 1947. Now, one interesting thing about the day that Luisa was born, she was born the Sunday after Easter, which obviously turned out to be
Divine Mercy Sunday.
and I've you've probably heard me say this many times that I believe there's such a wonderful association between Luisa Picaretta and uh, Faustina Kowalska because um, although they were, Faustina obviously was Polish, and Luisa is Italian, and but this messages that they got from God, this mission that they received from the Lord, and the way that they received it was very, very similar. So I thought it was just extremely,
And the
uh,
timing too. I mean,
yeah, the timing was incredible. So, um, and Louisa, and just want to tell you that a lot of this, what I'm uh, kind of focusing on tonight, is from this book of uh, the conglomerate of the Virgin Mary and the Kingdom, the 24 Hours of the Passion, the Letters of Louisa, prayer meditations, and a biography of Louisa. This is a wonderful book. Well, it's not that expensive. Dawn and I were just talking about it. But she was born in a family that was quite a patriarchal family. I mean, dad was large and in charge. And but it was deep in the country. It was very, very rural and very primitive where she lived. Now, Corrado is more of a town. And so when she was born in Corrado, and the family would come there to live in the wintertime.
what
But
did they do in the summer?
in the summers, they had a farm. And the farm was 17 miles from Corrado. And
Oh,
um, yeah, it's 17 miles from Corrado. And her parents had 5 children. There were 5 children in the family: Maria, Rochelle, Philomena, Louisa, and Angela. Maria, Rochelle, and Philomena got married. Uh, Angela, she was commonly called Angelina. So sometimes in the writings, when you'll read something about her family, they may call her Angelina, but it's the same sister. She remained single, and she lived and stayed and took care of Louisa her whole life until Louisa died. And so Louisa was born in this very sort of primitive, small Italian town, obviously very Catholic. She was baptized on the same day that she was born. I'm always impressed with so many of the saints, and you'll hear this, you read this in so many of their stories. They were baptized the day they were born,
yeah.
or possibly 1 or 2 days after. But
Which
they
is so
didn't.
different than our custom now, where we wait months or something.
Well,
You
yeah, you
know,
gotta have a party, and grandma can't get here until, March. So, she's not walking yet, so let's just wait. Um, it's really very, 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 very sad because um children do die. Apparently I had a cousin. I didn't know about this cousin until I was older, but I had an aunt and uncle who had one child, one daughter, and then they had another child, a little boy, and the little boy died of crib death after about 3 or 4 months. He died. And, of course, I was brought up in a Protestant, tradition, so nobody baptized anybody until you were, decided to be baptized yourself. But what a shame, and certainly in those days, in 1865, and, this wasn't that that far off from when uh, Therese of Lisieux lived, Saint Faustina. Um, these were uh, saints in this time, but they were all baptized very quickly after their death. I mean, after their birth, and I think that was one of the things. So she grew up in this family of 5 kids, 5 girls. You can imagine 5 girls, and dad was a farmer. Um, he was kind of a sharecropper. He didn't own the farm. He went to the farm to work on the farm. So they would leave. Springtime would come. They would leave. They would go out to work the fields and harvest the crops. And Louisa was a very, very sensitive child. She had this nature that was very, very timid, um, and fearful. She was fearful. Not She was beyond shy. She was fearful of people, and she really, really hated it when they went to this rural kind of setting. For one thing, the church was the church was in Corrado. They were in uh, off in off in the farm, and so her whole life, or kind of her whole spiritual life, everything in the family got really switched. And you can imagine, sort of but this is how many families lived in those times when maybe they went to live in town in the wintertime and they stayed on the farm in the summertime because life was hard in the wintertime. The fact that there were other people around and they were in a town may have been much more advantageous for them. And so Nicola Picaretta was a worker on this farm, and it was uh, very, very quiet there. It was, of course, it was Italy. It was on the coast. It was very, very sunny, very, very barren, very, very rocky, very, very isolated. And so she went off and she lived in this. Uh, they lived in an old house, and it says in front of this old house, a centuries-old mulberry tree still stands in front of the house that Louisa had grown up in. And there's a hollow in the tree. And as a child, this is how shy she was and
Yeah.
how scared she was. She would go hide in the hollow of this tree. When people would come to the house, particularly when they lived in town, she would run to the bedroom, and she would literally run to the bedroom and hide behind the bed. It wasn't enough that she just went to the room and shut the door. She hid behind the bed. And so this was the kind of temperament that Louisa was born with and grew up with. And as we look at it, you kind of look at it, um, you think, well, I don't know, why would Jesus pick this person of all people with this kind of temperament to give this kind of an assignment to? Well, we don't
You didn't
understand.
want to share her with anyone.
He didn't want to share. He said he didn't want to share her with anyone. So, um, but in this place and in this time, as a child, she began to suffer early on attacks from Satan, attacks from the evil one, because of course Satan knew, um, Satan could see her holiness. Let's not underestimate the intelligence of Satan. He was an angel, and angels are, and he was a high ranking angel. So we know that high ranking angels have extraordinary intelligence. And in this extraordinary intelligence, they can spot things. They know things. And so she even tormented the evil one, even tormented her physically at times. I mean, she really did suffer. And so in order to sort of combat this attack that she received as a child, she became very devoted in prayer. And prayer became a huge element in Louisa's life. And she obviously was a pious child. She was a pious young woman. She depended on the Lord. And and we'll talk about this later, she really wanted to be a nun, which in sort of our kind of thinking would have made a lot of sense. Wouldn't it have made sense for a person like Louisa to go into a cloister and
Mhm.
spend her life in quiet and in prayer? But that's not what the Lord had in mind. Sometimes we think we know. We think we know what the Lord has planned for us. And sometimes we go ahead and we fit this square peg in this round hole because we're so convinced,
And just when you do that, he shows you something else.
well, man, it might be years later and you might suffer for it intensely. But, she was pretty disappointed that that was not to be. That was kind of, her plan. But even as a little girl, she started to have mysterious experiences and mysterious kinds of. She said one day, this was when she was a little girl, actually. She
When she
said,
was about 9, are you talking about when she received her first communion?
no.
Okay,
He said
never
to
mind.
he said to her one day, her joys were no other than God. She had no other joys in life. That was the only thing that really gave her solace and happiness was her time with God. And he said, I've gone round and round the world again and again, and I looked one by one at all my creatures to find the smallest one of all. Among so many, I found you. Your littleness pleased me, and I chose you. I entrusted you to my angels so that they would care for you, not to make you great, but to preserve your littleness. And now I want to begin the great work of fulfilling my will. Nor will you feel any greater through this. Indeed, it is my will to make you even smaller, and you will continue to be the little daughter of the divine will. This is what Jesus said to her in volume 12 from March 23rd, 1921. So it gives you an idea. Louisa had really less than a first grade education. She basically had no education. She didn't know how to read. She didn't know how to write. Um, but when you know this about her and you read the writings, and this is one of the things that the Lord is he's very smart. He sets things up so that there can be really no question. When you read these writings, no no person with a less than a first grade education could have written them. It's not possible.
When I
Uh,
think about that and then I read the writings, um, I'm just like, sometimes you have to look up the words that she has written down because 'cause you're like, I don't know what this
okay,
is."
well, I was just gonna say, sometimes you have to look up these words. Who knew? Now, when she was 9, she received her first Holy Communion. That was when she received her, Eucharist, and also at that time, she was confirmed. Now, confirmation, we know that Eucharist comes at whenever, it's decided you're at a age of reason. In our society now, that's usually about 7 years old. For some people, and I know that there are some saints who actually the priest decided to give it to them early because they were just such pious little children. Sometimes they waited a little longer and made it, them a little older. It's the same with confirmation. Sometimes, people are confirmed at 10 years old, and sometimes they're not confirmed until they're 15 years old. So, um, uh, uh, time changes, traditions change in some ways, sort of pretending depending on the times. But you have to remember also, um, I will guarantee you that Louisa, for her age, was probably much more mature in some ways that children of the same age are now, because she grew up in a family of 5 that was very poor. Everyone had to do their part. I'm sure all 5 of those girls had to work on that farm. They had chores, they had things to do. They had lived in a very, very pious family. So they, I'm sure that they lived a regimented life. When she was 11, she wanted to enroll in the Association of the Daughters of Mary. Now, at the time, this Association of the Daughters of Mary was kind of really a big organization. This was something that uh, women did, little girls did, women did, and it was a kind of a devotional group, probably kind of maybe similar to like Legion of Mary or some of the things we'd be familiar with now. But and she was enrolled in the Church of San Giuseppe. When she was 18, she became a Dominican tertiary, taking the name of Sister Magdalena, and she was the first to enroll in the Third Order, which her parish priest was promoting in this Dominican order, and so she became a tertiary, which is basically like a third order nun. Um, and Many people now would look at that as maybe like an oblate or um, a Carmelite that's a third order Carmelite or some other lay connection to a particular order. And so she did that. Her parish priest was promoting that very heavily and was very, very happy to take her in. And she was the first actually to be um, um, uh, brought into enroll in this third order. Um, so she was very, very, very devoted to the Mother of God. She had a great devotion to the Blessed Mother. She was a very, very prayerful woman, young woman, and she uh, by this time, by the time she was 18 years old, she was already having visions, and she was having experiences and messages from Jesus. Many of us know that
So we
about
have
the
a question, Debbie.
okay.
Did Luisa's family believe her when she said she was speaking to Jesus?
Well, certainly her sister Angela did. I don't
I
think
think
that there
it
was
took a little before they really realized what was happening.
yeah. Well, it would be for anyone. I mean,
Right.
think about it. Think about how hard it is for us. Imagine how hard it is for them.
Right.
Um, she did uh, she was able because of her relationship with Jesus. Now, when she was a teenager, from the balcony of her house in Corrado, this was when she lived in the city. She heard this noise really from the street. She went out to the balcony to look and see what was going on, and what she saw was a great vision. And this vision was Jesus carrying his cross. And she
Didn't he say like soul help me or
said,
something
"Oh,
like that?
soul." Jesus looked up at her and said, "Oh, soul, help me." And she said, from that moment on, she had an insatiable longing to suffer for Jesus and to pray and sacrifice for the salvation of souls. This is when uh, this connection, personal connection with Jesus, really began. Was at this point on the balcony, and so she began to experience physical sufferings. And Jesus told her, and there's much written in the in the writings about Louisa's sufferings. Louisa suffered tremendously. If you read any saint, find me a saint that didn't suffer. I I I I don't know of a saint that didn't suffer in some way to some extent. Many of the times it was physical suffering. Many of the times it was mental suffering. There were attacks from the evil one. There were attacks of doubt, of fever, of paralysis, of tuberculosis, of all kinds of cancer, all kinds of things. Um, and really, as you read the saints, one of the things that was most painful for them were these occasions when these sufferings would become so difficult and so painful, they would begin to doubt and question their own faith.
Yes.
And most, again, you read the saints, they will have this crisis of faith, um, understandably. Here you are, you have this longing for God, and you look at a person like Louisa, who did everything that she could. I mean, she was had completely dedicated and sacrificed her life to God, and yet, hmm, yeah, when we get into the kinds of sufferings that she had, they were remarkable and they were very, very difficult. And she by no means led a life of any normality, when you consider the times or how other young women would live at that time. But she was so in love with Jesus. She was she was so taken and wanted. She really wanted to be taken under Our Lady's mantle. She wanted to be covered in Our Lady and live in this little world with Jesus and Mary. And basically that's what she did. But oh, how we have reaped the benefits. This is one of the things that's so remarkable, is because she really didn't see that she had um, a lot to offer, and Jesus felt otherwise. We go back to this when Jesus was talking to her, because this is very, 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 very important, and we can overlook it. And this is why we need to read the writings so carefully and uh, so closely. He said, I looked one by one at all my creatures to find the smallest one of all. Your littleness pleased me, and I chose you. I entrusted you to my angels so that they would care for you, not to make you great, but to preserve your littleness. And now I want to begin the great work of fulfilling my will. In order to fulfill the will of God and to live in the divine will, we must become little, little. When we surrender our will, which, as I always say, is the only thing we own, it's the only thing that really have to give to Jesus is our will. We have to be little. We are such, we've grown up, and particularly in the society now, where what's in it for me? What's the deal? What do I get out of this? Why would I? And even sometimes when we do a good a good work or a good deed or do something, we kind of want everybody to know it. We kind of do. We kind of want everybody to know it. We kind of want everybody to know, hey, I did a good thing. But that's not what Jesus taught us. He said, don't let your right hand know what your left hand's doing. Pay no attention. Everything you have, I gave you anyway. Who do you think you are? This is what we need to remember. Everything we have is a gift from God. We didn't really earn it, and we don't deserve it. But we have it because of his great love for us. And the very least that we could do is be grateful. That takes a lot of work. We have the rounds to show how grateful we are, because we need a ritual just to even show our gratefulness. But this is how wonderful Jesus is. He knows us so well. He knows us so well that he gave us the rounds as a way to give glory and praise to God, and even show our gratefulness. Anyway, I um, digress. So, oh, I turned the page. um, this was the time, as she saw this happening on the balcony, when she really became, and Jesus, If Jesus is looking up at you from the street, he's carrying his cross, he is so bloody, he's unrecognizable, and says, "Oh, soul, help me." What could that possibly mean? If that was an experience that you have, I'm sure one of the things that would be happening in your mind is, "Help you how? Are you even real? Is this even real? Am I even seeing this? Help you. How am I supposed to help you?" But it became, um, immediately apparent to her because suddenly she was infused, if you will, with this insatiable longing, for souls, to save souls. And I do believe, um, this salvation of souls needs to become a longing for us as well, because this is what our acts in the divine will do. They save souls. Doing all this stuff, let's be clear, it's not to save us.
Right.
It says if you live in the divine will, you're good. You're good to go. You're not even going to go to purgatory. The point is I want all of my children with me. And I want to exponentially increase my effects. And I want you involved in it. I want you with me. I want you and I to be fused together in purpose, in thought, mind, spirit. And so he gave us the divine will. And so she develops this longing for souls and this longing to suffer for Jesus. She understood immediately. It was infused in her. And this is one of the beautiful things. And this is why we need to know Luisa and why we need to know what happened to Luisa. Because what happened to Luisa is what Jesus wants for us. He wants to infuse these things to us. He wants us to detach ourselves from ourself, which is exactly what he did. It says Jesus' voice led Luisa to detachment from herself and from everyone,
Even her family.
even her family, because there's a certain amount of detachment that we must have if we truly want to live in the divine will and completely surrender to God, completely surrender to this mission that Jesus is asking us to live out. And so detachment is part of the thing, we grow up and we're expected to leave our families. We're expected to marry or go into religious life or, live a single life. You can live a holy single life. But you're expected to sort of detach from your parents and even to some extent from your siblings. Although I'm still one to believe that the closest relationship that we have in life is truly with our siblings because our siblings have lived the same experience we've had and we have that connection. But we have to be more attached to God than anything, to our own family, and certainly to ourselves. So she began these physical sufferings. Um, she had many spiritual sufferings. She had great spiritual and emotional suffering, great emotional suffering, because she was so humble and she was so little that she was constantly questioning. She was constantly questioning. For one thing, it was very hard for her to believe that God had actually chosen her. She knew she wasn't particularly bright. She certainly wasn't outgoing. She certainly didn't have a dynamic personality. She wasn't educated. What did she do? She learned from her aunt how to basically tat lace, and that's what she did in bed for 40 years.
To support herself, yeah.
To support herself. So we're gonna hear more about this. But then um, she started to have these sufferings, and her family sort of mistook this because these sufferings were sufferings from God. I mean, she had physical sufferings, she had emotional and mental sufferings, and her parents thought that there was something wrong with her. She was sick. They thought that this was a natural kind of phenomenon. They didn't realize that these struggles that she was experiencing were really of a spiritual nature. They were a higher form, and so she had this very unusual clinical condition, and nobody could figure it out. Nobody understood it because what happened. Um, in these heroic sufferings is she had um, would become in an almost corpse-like state. Her body would become so rigid and really stone-like, and it was crazy because she didn't show any signs of life. If you didn't know better, you would have thought she was dead. Now, for someone who is as shy and as retiring and as hoping to be hidden as she was, this was a horrible, horrific situation to be in. Talk about something that would draw attention to yourself.
Right. That's just what I was going to say because they had doctors examine her and
She had all kinds of doctors. She had all the doctors were perplexed because they'd never seen anything like this before. And then they came to realize that what brought her out of this state was for a priest to touch her. A priest was the only thing that could bring her out of this state. And they didn't understand why. They didn't understand what was going on. And some people, I'm sure, thought that it was demonic. Oh my gosh. This just doesn't happen. Who'd ever heard of such a thing? And so the suffering was terrible for her, not only physically, because it was physically, I'm sure, very uncomfortable, very awful, but it was emotionally, mentally, spiritually difficult because it drew a lot of attention to her. There are people coming in her room. Teresa had to come. And there was a time when, the priest decided that she was just doing this for attention.
Mhm.
And so they just left her lay there and would not come and place their hands on her to take her out of this state. I've heard conflicting stories, conflicting accounts of how long that would go on. I know one is that she laid there for 8 days before a priest came and touched her and brought her out of it. But she only began to be brought the priests into this because my family had reached their absolute end to what could be done medically. And and this you see this happen. We go through the normal sort of route of doctors and medicine and uh, physicality. And when you've just lost all hope and
We've
nothing.
we've got a couple comments here.
Okay.
And so I'm not sure if I'm saying this name right. Labor Metals says, it struck me how much Luisa's state of rigidity and illness is like the state of the world. And Diana says, this brought more attention to her, attention she didn't want. And I agree with that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
This was greater suffering for her that just added to her suffering. And
right.
just when she thought that she had suffered the most she could possibly suffer.
Right. And then, there was also a point where she only lived off the Eucharist too. And so if she ate something, she would throw it up, but it would be like in the same form that she ate
Right.
it.
Right. We haven't got to
And
this. quite yet,
And then
but
they would command her to eat. I'm sure that was
right.
embarrassing too for
Yes,
her.
it used to feel like it was unfair for her to experience those sufferings. She didn't understand it. You know,
Right.
she didn't understand it. Who would understand that? I don't know that she felt like it was unfair. I think she just was like, "What the heck?" I mean,
Well, yeah, I would say, like, embarrassing or, like, all
it
this
was very
attention is
embarrassing.
brought to me.
She wouldn't
I'm
bring any.
telling you I can't eat it, but you're making me.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So this is where we are. We've come to this point where Louisa is in bed, 24/7, and she has this condition where she literally becomes like a corpse, and she must be brought out of it by a priest. And I think that's where we're going to stop for today. I think that's as far as we're going to get for tonight because there's so much that's really incredible in this story, and I want
Yeah,
everyone to really be able to take this in. But she wanted, and this question of did she feel like it was unfair? No, she wanted to suffer for Jesus. She wanted this closeness to Jesus, and she understood, I believe, that it was uh, you know uh, saints suffer.
yeah, I would say it's like, how is that described? Like pearls or jewels of great price, your sufferings,
Hmm.
or the
So
crowns that you'll receive in heaven from the suffering, and how it helps souls, um, for their conversion.
and I do have one question that I want to ask before we go, and you can make a comment about this, please, in the comments. Not particularly the chat, but in the comments below. If you could like and subscribe the video for one thing, because that helps in the algorithm. You all know that. Um, I feel compelled to tell you every time. But one of the things that I would like to know and hear from you in the comments is, I'm considering on doing a whole series on Louisa. And there are many, many, many things, even besides what is in the writings, the Divine Will writings. There are many things that she wrote. There is the book, The Son of My Will. There are the letters of Louisa. There are many, many things that we can learn from Louisa and learn about um, in the divine will. If that's something that you would be interested in and that you would watch, I would be happy to do that. I just really am just interested in doing seeing what you want to see and doing what you want to hear. We are going to be into Lent next week, and we'll be looking at that because we need to be talking about the hours of the passion because the hours of the passion is something that we truly truly need to be focusing on during Lent. We need to focus on the hours of the passion every single day, but particularly to sort of really go into this period of deep prayer and sacrifice that we're asked uh, to commit to during Lent is really important, and for us to really dive deep into the sufferings and the sacrifice of Jesus and his mother,
And his
because
prayers, yep, his
yeah,
reparation prayers and that.
yeah, and it just wasn't Jesus who suffered in the Passion. His mother suffered greatly as well because anything that Jesus suffered, she suffered right along with him. And so we need to remember the sufferings not only of Jesus but also the sufferings of Mary. So with that in mind, we'll say goodnight for tonight.
I wanna say a shout out to Kathy because it's her birthday too,
Oh, oh, okay, Kathy. Oh,
so
good.
happy
Happy
birthday,
birthday.
you
Oh,
guys.
we get so many birthdays. Oh my gosh, yeah. My birthday's not for months, but everybody has their birthday. And Kathy, you have one. I believe that Kathy is. Uh, she's not in the United States. I'll just say that she's not in the United States, and she said it's tomorrow. Um, and so thank you so much for spending part of your birthday with Dawn and I. We really appreciate it. And yeah, Kathy's in New Zealand. And I hear from Kathy from time to time, and I just love hearing from all of you. And you should have my email by now. I'll put it up just in case. It's always in the description as well. But uh, yeah, I love hearing from you guys, and I'm always interested in your opinion and what you'd like to hear. I'm here for us all to learn together, because I don't care how long you've been in the divine will. I also want to mention, because it's going to come up before next week, if you only come on Wednesdays, Tuesday, Mother Gabriel is going to be on with me. And then on Friday, we're going to have, or Thursday, I think. Look, you'll have to look and see. Sam Kadoria is going to be on with me again. And so we have a lot of exciting stuff coming up next week, sort of in preparation for Lent and just in celebration of Ash Wednesday and what's coming. So stay tuned. More coming. I'm sure Dan Shields will be with us pretty soon. And also, I guess I can say this, although we haven't scheduled him yet, Father Dominic O'Connor is going
Exciting.
to be showing up on our channel. So we have lots of good stuff coming, and lots of things going on. So I just praise and thank God for these people that He's brought into our orbit, so that we can gain from their knowledge and experience in the divine will, because these are people who've been studying the divine will for a long time, and there's so much to learn, so much to learn. But our little pea brains can only absorb so much at a time. But we just keep plugging away at it. So God bless you all. I love to see you all here, and I pray for each one of you every single day, and I hope that you will pray for me and pray for Dawn. Pray for those of us that are working here, trying to bring this message to everyone, because we know that Jesus was. So Dawn, if you
Sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring. Yes, ma'am. We're just full of cliches here, and it is little. Kathy, I agree. It would be wonderful to see Father Celso, but I don't think that's going to happen. The more we learn, the more we can learn to live in His will. Absolutely.
And Debbie, you're a great leader, and your voice is so pleasant.
This cracks my brothers up. I got to tell you. They remember as a shrieking sister when we were little growing up. Thank you. And this is kind of, God gives us all these little gifts. My whatever my voice is what it is. It's a gift from God, and I truly believe that, because I thank you so much, Beth, because I hear this from so many people, but I also recognize that it has nothing to do with me. You get the voice you get, but it's another sign for me that God wants me to share and to teach and to be unselfish. This is I won't say this takes a lot of work, but it takes a lot of work. And for those of you who don't know it, you may have caught on by now, and you may not. I am not appearing on Mother in Refuge any longer, because I want to. Not that there's no problem with Ron. There was nothing happened, except that I want to be able to devote myself completely to this channel and completely to the divine will. And so that's what I'm doing. And I think you're going to see a lot more content with that sort of other commitment being removed. So, and I can't always, as I always say, I can't thank Dawn enough for her contributions, because it's not just what she does here. She does so much else behind the scene, and just the support that she gives me, the prayer support, the encouragement, everything that she does for me is so wonderful and so helpful. So, keep both of us in your prayers. Lord knows we need them.
Yes.
And we're just so grateful for this life. So we will see you next time. And always remember to live in His will. Good night.
Good night.